So let's start off with a couple questions. I'm going to see who in the audience has used some of this AI stuff. So who's used some of the new AI tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney and stuff like that? Okay, all right. So basically the whole room. Who thinks AI is a risk to humanity? Let's see. Anyone? Okay, about 40% of the room. Who thinks it's an opportunity? Okay, even more. All right. Who thinks it's both? Yeah, well, that's usually my answer to most things, right? Who thinks AGI, like artificial general intelligence, is going to wipe us all out? Anyone out there thinks that? Yep. Okay, there's a few people. So, look, I've only got 10 minutes today, so I'm going to try and get into the meat of it, which is, I believe there are real risks with AI, and I think there are fake risks. And I think it's incumbent on us, particularly as a Bitcoin community, to understand the difference, because it's very easy to get people whipped up into a hysteria around things that are like nebulous risks, climate being a really interesting one. For me, the fake risks, because this is where we'll start before we get into the real risks, of the artificial general intelligence flavor. The AI becoming sentient and fucking killing us all. I believe that at best, that's like a nihilistic, like a nerd's nihilistic wet dream. I think at worst, it's actually a red herring. Or in other words, like a narrative designed to scare people into voting for more regulation on AI, which basically means regulating language. So, I've got this famous sort of little meme here, right? Which is where I think the fake AI risks are basically encapsulated, right? Now, I say this not because I don't believe artificial general intelligence, for example, is not possible. Who knows? Maybe it is. But I don't believe we're anywhere near it. And the reason being is, we don't even have any idea what the hell cognitive intelligence is, let alone, embodied intelligence. Like, when you think about, we have intelligence in our muscles, in our hormones, in our emotions, all these are, there's an innumerable amount of intelligences that make up general intelligence, and we're barely understanding a sliver of a single one. So, and then you also have, obviously, the problem of consciousness, which is an even bigger rabbit hole, because, we don't even understand intelligence, let alone that. So I don't think AGI, for example, is a major risk that we need to worry about. But I think there is a real risk, and where also the real opportunity actually lies, which is what I basically called language user interfaces. So is anyone sort of familiar with this as a concept yet? Language user interface? Yeah, maybe some people. All right. So basically, the idea is, let's start with a bit of a history, right? So we started with kind of the CLI, then we went to a graphical user interface. So we went to pointing and clicking on a screen, then we went tapping with our thumbs. And sort of the language user interface is this place where we can speak to our applications. We can ask questions, we can have a dialogue, we can communicate, right? And if you think about sort of what the internet was in the beginning, the internet was supposed to be a universe of ideas, right? It was I've got a note here. It was the ideaversity, right? So in cyberspace, and this sort of changed with the rise of search and social media, right? And in the beginning, this was a good thing. Search and social media search in particular made information on the internet discoverable, and social media supposedly made it relevant. But as things centralized, or as things became concentrated, what we ended up having was the screen became the internet, right? So these days, who looks past Google's first page, right? Or even, we don't even scroll to the bottom of Google's first page anymore. We just click on, the quick answers that Google gives us. So it's important to realize that our entire reality, and this is sort of like Plato's cave, right, with the shadows, our entire reality is shaped by what we're able to see, learn, and perceive. And what's interesting is that these language user interfaces, And this is what's really important. This is where I want to get you guys to think about the difference between this AGI fake risk and where the real potential risk is that the language model is the new screen or the new interface through which we're going to access the internet. So sort of imagine a world where everything you know about the world, all of the information that you get, you don't surf the internet anymore, you just ask a model a question. And then imagine if those models that everything knew about the world was, monitored by, what I call the approved language police, right? Like these guys who, mandate these filters or, safe language or whatever else they want to do. And this stuff is already coming down the pipeline. When you hear them talk about sort of AI safety, this is essentially what they're talking about. They're actually talking about regulating speech. That's the code word you should hear in your head. So, like, to me, like this is important because it's almost like an Orwellian wet dream. Imagine if you could concentrate or basically narrow into an Overton window everything that is sort of said and learnt about on the internet. You can actually you kind of do a mixture of Orwell's thought police, because you're monitoring everything everyone says, but you're also doing inception, because everything that you ask a model kind of comes back in a pre-prescribed, safe sort of format. So this is what I believe is the great risk, and I think we need to sort of understand this. And when they try and sort of scare people about fairy tales of general intelligence is going to pop up tomorrow because we somehow figured out language, I want you to remember this sort of talk, this point, because it's going to be important as we start to think about what we're going to do. Which leads me, of course, to the ultimate question, which is, how the hell do we combat this? Like, what do we do about the fact that there is these massive companies, essentially, through which we access the internet, are going to regulate speech. So what do we do? Well, I think it's simple. Very similar to what we did with Bitcoin in some senses. We need to build alternatives. They need to be better. They need to be open source. We need to specialize them. We need to trend them towards being compact enough so that anybody can run them locally, almost like kind of in the same way as you run a program today. So in that vein, I want to introduce everybody to something that myself and a small team of people, small team of Bitcoiners and tech guys have been working on for like a number of months now. It is called the Spirit of Satoshi. And essentially what it is, it's a first principles Bitcoin-centric language model that is that we're building essentially from the ground up, oriented on Bitcoin principles. So we're training it on classical literature, on Austrian economics, on Bitcoin, on libertarian sort of ideals. And we want it to become like the global repository of all the Bitcoin information. So kind of like a global Bitcoin brain. And sometimes when I get carried away thinking about this, I almost think that, well, I should actually say first that we're going to build this alongside the Bitcoin community. So we're building some tooling now that's going to allow us to do the reinforcement learning stage, reinforcement learning by human feedback, RLHF, with the global Bitcoin community itself, where you'll be able to ask Satoshi a question, you'll be able to give it some feedback and say, look, this is a better way to respond, and then people can upvote those responses with sats, and then the best responses will get fed back into the system, and then the people with the best responses will get the sats. But when I think about what this represents, it's almost, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the stories, it's like Satoshi was an AI that came back from the future. Maybe this is the point where we actually start to build that. So, the broader vision behind this is that I believe to orange pill the next billion people, because in the next decade, my guess is that even if we don't do much as a Bitcoin community, the central bankers and the statists and the politicians of the world are essentially going to deteriorate the world of their own accord. I think Saylor was talking earlier about the money and the S&P and the inflation rate and everything. Like, they're doing the damage themselves. We almost have to just like sit around and wait for them to break everything. But in that process, there's going to be somewhere between 100 million to 1 billion people in the next decade asking the question, what the hell is Bitcoin? And they're going to be asking it in 100 different languages at different times of the day. And, Sailor, as much as he's a superhuman, I don't think he can answer everybody. So what we wanted to do here was build a language model that can actually operate at scale, that can answer all of these things. So a little kind of tagline that we're doing this with is like, with this model, basically, we're no longer all Satoshi, but Satoshi actually becomes all of us as we, as a Bitcoin community, start to build this together. So, as I said, in the coming weeks, we're going to be opening up our toolkit, enabling everybody to get in there and actually interact with the model and give it some feedback. You'll be able to log in with Nostr, with /tags, with all sorts of things like that. And we'll actually show the world what the power of what Bitcoin is. So my final thoughts, and this is sort of the idea that I want to leave you guys with, is that we need parallel systems. We've heard this a million times, people talking about citadels and all sorts of things. Bitcoin was the first truly parallel independent system in the world. Like, before Bitcoin, you were stuck with fiat. You didn't have an option. I mean, you could try carry your gold around, but that wasn't very functional. The only person who still does that is Peter Schiff. And, Bitcoin kind of gave us an escape valve. Now, we need to take that and we need to do it in other dimensions, because what we're up against is, the same people who built OpenAI, they're building this sort of iris scanning, CBDCs, so that trade your eyeball for like some peasant money, basically. And they're also building the educational systems. Every single educational institution moving forward is going to be powered or supplemented through some sort of language model. And guess which language models they're going to use? They're going to use the mainstream language models, the generalist language models, the language models that are deemed safe and have approved speech. So we need to build the alternatives. And I think with a tool like this, with Bitcoin, with the engagement of the entire Bitcoin community, I think we have an opportunity to have sound, sovereign money, holistic education, and what I kind of like to think of as authentic AI. So we have, I guess you guys are actually the first people to hear about this in the world, because we were sort of working on it in stealth. So if you are interested, if you want to check it out, if you want to, we've got like a wait list, if you're interested in helping out from a open source perspective, from a feedback perspective, if you want to just look at it, just go to spiritofsatoshi.ai and you'll be able to pop your details in there. And other than that, I'll be around. I'll be at the consensus signing booth. I'll be walking around. Come see me. Come ask any questions. Any feedback is welcome. But for me, this is a big, I envision this as a utility for the entire Bitcoin community, and I want everybody to get involved in some capacity. So thank you, everybody, for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll see you all out there.